let's just take my parents for a second.
Okay.
My parents are good people, lifelong Democrats. They live in L.A., surrounded by Hollywood types. They cannot seem to grasp the fact that the party that they believed in is now doing the inverse of everything they signed up for.
Exactly.
Because the New York Times rephrases everything so it seems like the values are still there.
Right. Which is wild.
It's crazy. And if you're not a New York Times reader, you can barely figure out what these people are talking about.
Did you see the article that I posted on my Instagram that's a title of a New York Times article for today?
Which one?
Jamie, pull this up. I want Brett to see this so you know this is real. This isn't the Babylon Bee. This is an actual New York Times article. You see it?
Yeah, I had it in a weird spot. Let me grab from your Instagram.
This is so crazy. It's really hard to believe that someone would print this and the New York Times would say, yeah, we like it. Put it out there.
I'm not quite sure what to expect.
Look at this.
Oh, yeah, of course.
The Constitution is sacred. Is it also dangerous?
Right.
One of the biggest threats to American politics might be the country's founding document. What the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah.
One of the biggest threats to America's politics might be one of the greatest documents that any country was ever founded on, if not the greatest ever.
Mm-hmm.
That could be a threat to America's politics. What politics are we talking about? Like what? How could you possibly gaslight me enough to go along with you on this?
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, it's on the one hand completely predictable, right?
Right.
Because there's obviously an authoritarian force there that just grinds its teeth at night over the Constitution and the fact that it prevents it from doing things that it just wants to do last week, you know? And so, of course, they're like scratching their heads like, can we come up with an argument for why it might be time to get rid of that thing? And of course, if you're a normal thinking person, this is complete insanity. But if you're a New York Times reader, I'm sure that fits with the kind of ethos that's been cultivated.
Well, this is why a person like Trump is so important to them. Because if you don't have someone that is an imminent threat on the horizon in 3 months, it's very difficult to justify all this shit. So if you have Kamala Harris and she's competing against Ron DeSantis, if it's just Kamala Harris and Ron DeSantis and Trump doesn't exist, maybe he died. Maybe he died in the last few years, you know. Mm-hmm. How could you wouldn't be able to make that argument? You wouldn't. There's no imminent threat.
Right.
Right. Let's say Mitt Romney. Let's say someone even more moderate as a Republican, even more palatable. You can't make that. You can't make that argument that we can't have a First Amendment because the First Amendment is getting in the way. The First Amendment is allowing people to say things that aren't true, misinformation and disinformation, and we're right here. We're September 2nd. I think yesterday was the first day where Brazil banned Twitter.
I know.
So X is illegal to have in Brazil as of today, as of yesterday. And not only is it illegal, but you go through it through a VPN and they will charge you $8,000 a day.
I know. It's incredible that we are watching this.
Insane.
But I would remind you, they did pull this stuff when it was Mitt Romney, when it was George W. Bush, right? The rhetoric was still existential threat, right? And they always have particular versions of this, right?
Not as ramped up as this.
Right.
Is, this is like Hitler talk.
No,
this isn't. They never talked about Mitt Romney like he was Hitler.
I agree. And as I've been saying since the beginning of this electoral cycle, they fear Bobby Kennedy far more than they fear Trump because actually Trump gives them the only argument for their existence that is functional. Right? They don't have an affirmative argument for why they should be in power, but being the alternative to Trump is, that's a pitch.
Right.
So we are now somewhere pretty interesting in the sense that I think, to the faithful, that argument still works. But to a larger and larger group of people, they're seeing right through it.
Yeah.
They're understanding. First of all, we lived through 4 years of Trump. Right?
Right.
There were good aspects. There were bad aspects. But, it was not distinguished as some moment of, total failure of our system or something.
Right.
You know, there were a lot of elements of it that were very positive.
Right. That's and that's where a fun meme is. There's a fun meme that someone made about how you're telling me that he's going to do these things that he didn't when he was in office, and you're telling me that you're going to do these things that you didn't do and you're in office now.
Right.
Like, what?
And add to that, you're doing the things that you're accusing him of intending to do, right?
Yeah.
All this lawfare stuff, that's frightening. They're weaponizing the courts.
Yeah, and they're weaponizing the courts over what was a misdemeanor with that's already. If you look at the like Bill Ackman had a post that he made on Twitter laying out the legality of this 34 count thing that they convicted him of. That this is essentially an accounting error or deception that's a misdemeanor that is past the statute of limitations.
Not only that, but I don't think you have to really even squint at it to see that it's just simply unconstitutional to point the courts at particular people and not other people.
Right.
We have a constitutional right to equal protection under the law, and obviously they are setting a different standard for Trump because they want to keep him tied up in court. Maybe they want to lock him up and put him in prison. But whatever they're doing is un-American. It is
and
anti-American.
and very dangerous because you've set a precedent now. Now let's imagine, like we've gone through shifts in this country where we leaned heavily left, like during the Carter administration, it was run by serious lefty, you know, and then what if now it is run by a hardcore right-winger? What if there's some sort of an attack on American soil and it ramps up patriotism and people get real angry and right the you know, just like the left has moved so far left that if you're not in favor of hormone blockers for kids, somehow you're transphobic and you're a bigot. Like somehow or another, if you're not in favor of that, you're a bigot. What if it gets so right that if you're not in favor of, you know, stops and frisks all over the country for everyone, then somehow or another you're anti-safety?